Okay, what's shaking? Joy Revolution podcast with your boy Mark Cordone. If we haven't met yet, I get to assist on a regular basis people who want to change history for the better through creativity and joy. How fun is that? How fun is that? How fun is it that we get to sometimes blur work and play together? And to me, that's the secret of life. I think we're going to have more secrets of life today, as my guest is trained in executive leadership, known as a connector, an encourager, wife, mother, grandmother. She is soon to be speaking on the TEDx stage at TEDxOcala, November the 9th. The theme is humanity, and I have a feeling we're going to be talking about humanity today. She's also the author of Practicing Hospitality, the joy and grace of loving strangers. That's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. This thing just came out a couple months ago, so I can't wait to talk about that more. Let's welcome Annie McCune. Annie, how are you doing today?
Mark,
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here. I knew the word joy in the title would catch you, so that's what I'm excited about.
I absolutely loved it. I want to cut to the chase. I want to talk about hospitality right out of the bag, because when I think of that, when I started seeing that you were coming on the show, I thought about sort of what I've been grown up with, these Filipino values. When someone shows up at your door, the first thing that you ask is, "Are you hungry? Have you eaten? Sit down. Here's a sandwich. We don't care if you're not hungry. Eat it." Those sorts of things. So Annie, how do you define hospitality, and sort of how did you get so connected in it all these years later?
Well, that's such a good question, Mark, because I'm not always the first to ask, like, are you hungry or thirsty? But we've been really good about just opening our doors. And that was something that came, my husband and I went to the same college church, and they talked a lot about how we are stewards, not owners of anything in this world. And so if God's entrusted you with something, it's his, it's not yours. So it helps to have that mentality. And so if you have an extra chair at the table, maybe God wants to fill it. If you have an extra bedroom, it's probably not for all your extra stuff. It might be needed sometime for somebody who needs a place to stay. And so those were some things that were very intrinsic to me. I also grew up in a large extended Catholic family. So my grandmother's lived next door. The same thing.
Doing a high five.
Cousins down the street. Open doors.
Yeah.
If you didn't have something, just go ask Aunt Mary or Aunt Ellen. Kids in and out all the time. Everyone helping themselves to grandma's candy drawer. And, just a sense of
candy drawer.
Did you have one of those?
It was with the butterscotch. Always butterscotch candy.
Oh, there's like little things. Yeah. Good stuff. There you go. And I remember bringing my friends over to my grandmother's house and just kind of walking in the door and going for the candy drawer. And they kind of looked at me like, "Are we allowed to do this?" And I'm, "Oh, yeah." It's open door and grandma's candy drawer. Everyone's welcome to it. And then being sort of shocked. And then afterwards, I thought, well, maybe not everybody does do this. Yeah. And the older I grew, the more I realized, not a whole lot of people do this. And and as the years have gone on, and I'm a blessed 67 now, fewer and fewer people are doing it. And so when I had a chance, a lot of people had been saying, "You should write a book on hospitality sometime." And it's not that I'm a good cook, Mark, because I am not. And it's not that I keep a clean house, because I do not. And there's some people who really do that really well. And I wish I were them. I am not them. But I'm really good at just saying, "Come on in. Here's a place. Set the table for me." And, and overlook a lot of stuff. And the more you do that, the more you realize people just love coming in, and they just love connecting. And so that's kind of my joy revolution. I know don't want to say
you're skipping all the way to the end.
But it really is. That's the title of my book. As I started writing down, I want people to know there is so much joy.
Yeah.
when we practice hospitality. Now, you mentioned the Filipino type. I know so many cultures are really good, almost to the extreme,
Yeah.
almost to the uncomfortable. It's like, this is about making you know that I want
That
to make
I
you
am
really, 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 really happy. And if you don't, I'm going to be offended.
it's
And
all about me, not you, guest.
that and that's where we've gone wrong, and I think that scares a lot of people too. It's like, I don't have the energy to make it about me,
Yeah.
and I don't have the desire to make it about you, so let's
Yeah.
just not do this thing. And that's what I want to change.
Amazing. And you've got a lot of things in terms of like I get to follow up with that for the next 40 minutes. You've got so many points that have opened up. Um, Agree or disagree? We are in an age where folks are feeling more and more isolated, more and more lonely. And to me, it would make the case for hospitality to
Yeah.
come in and help with that. Do you believe that we are in that kind of
Oh my
age right now?
gosh,
And why?
Mark.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, you just see it. I remember being on my college campus a couple years ago. I went back to, I was on some kind of a thing I was there for. Anyways, I was used to being on this very open campus where people would walk by and smile,
Yeah.
and nobody made eye contact with me. Everybody had their earpods in.
Yeah.
Most people had their phones. Nobody was looking up. And I just was so shocked. It was like, what has happened here?
Right.
And and then I've just noticed too, well, the Surgeon General, when I started writing the book, um, I thought, well, is it in my head or not? And the Surgeon General wrote this report a couple of months ago where he says 1/2 of the US population is suffering the effects of loneliness and isolation that's affecting them physically and mentally,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is leading to shortened lifespan. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's
To-
not just you're not just perceiving something. It's just not me. I mean, this is really happening. And they said it's going to be worse than the COVID pandemic. It's affecting more people than
I,
COVID did.
I could totally see that. And I've heard a lot of I'm not as young as I may look, which is good. That's a good thing, right? But a lot of times people will be like, "Oh, it wasn't like this in the good old days, blah blah blah." But like straight up, someone had showed me or I had been watching this lecture and it showed a picture of folks from like the 50s and 60s waiting for the bus to show up, right? And so it just showed one person in front of the other, and there was a certain distance that these folks had, right?
Hmm.
And then it showed one. I think it was right before COVID, right? And the distance between them was like triple the size. So even sort of psychological ideas of what our space and boundaries look like would kind of promote this sort of feeling of I don't feel connected to folks anymore,
Right.
or
And
even
I
like go
or
ahead.
I'm afraid to be, or I don't need to be.
Yeah, completely, completely. And I don't know about you, Annie, but would you feel like the world, or maybe the fact that we're living in the United States, wherever we want to identify our context, do you feel like the world has become even more us versus them, me versus you? We're not in this together. I'm isolated, and you do your
Ah,
thing. Uh huh.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're 3 weeks away from an election.
Yeah.
And I think my biggest fear is that the week following, we're not sending hate notes to each other. We're not
Yeah.
building our, I don't know. I mean, we're so far beyond snow forts. I mean, we in this whole season of just hurling things at each other, without just considering the humanity
Hmm.
of every person
Yeah.
involved. I mean, I learned that lesson years ago. I ran for school board. Whew. Um, I had no idea. They send you to school board school. I was in New York State. They send you to
Okay.
Albany, and people said, "Well, what do you learn at school board school?" I said, "You put on plastic coats, and that you get ready to be, thrown tomatoes at." Which unfortunately is part of the political process. And then, um, even again, we're talking small town,
Yeah.
Orchard Park, New York, and 60,000 people, and I would show up in the local paper, in caricatures that were
What?
yeah, It's kind of fun to be in a political cartoon. I said, as long as they make me look good, I'm good. But it was killing my 6-year-old, and he said,
Yeah.
"I'm going to write a letter to the editor. That's not fair. They're saying nasty things about you, Mom." And I just saw it from a very, how this affects families, how this
Yeah.
affects neighborhoods, and it's, can we just be kind? Can we
Yeah.
listen to each other? Someone has a point of view and they've probably got a good reason for it. Listen to
Mm,
their story.
mm,
Um, you know, uh, one of the sad things about democracy does not mean, and it's one of the joys of democracy, it doesn't mean we all think alike.
right.
Sometimes it means that the majority wins. And that means that often 50% of the people are going to be in this election. It seems like that 50% of the people are going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do with that? Are we just going to say, oh, yeah, good for us, bad for them, or nobody understands us and great for that, Or are we going to listen to each other? Are we going
Yeah.
to let's have them for dinner? I don't know where you are on the thing on the political spectrum, and I don't, I'm afraid to even reveal where I am because it's like I'm afraid you're going to hate me, and I don't want to be hated.
Yeah.
And I don't also want to be afraid to vote, which kind of right
Completely.
now I'm afraid to vote
Yeah.
because, like, uh, you know what I mean?
I totally know where you're coming from. And I think one of the cool parts of sort of the work that I get to do, Joy Revolutions, is that
Yeah.
one of the tenets is controversy with civility,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just looking at things and it's not complete like where has the world gone, but just to be like, oh boy, what's going on here?
Yeah.
One person was almost killed, blah, 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 and there's still not connection going on. I do love how you're talking about this idea of being able to have a perspective shift, and like, since I was young, growing up with Jesuits, they had always taught me like, yeah, you're not the center of your own universe, dude. Like to be able to sit in someone else's shoes or to have dinner with somebody and truly get where they're coming from is one of the biggest miracles ever. And by no way, shape, or form am I a person that says I do that every single day, but it always proves me right when I just go out of the way and just have that dinner with somebody, that one day where it's just like, no, I want to go home or I don't want to do the podcast today. And then the next thing you know, we're having an amazing conversation.
Right.
I, there's something that you brought up. Um, I believe I don't see it in my notes, but it's phylloxenia. Is that
Yeah.
is and
And
and so
that's
like. Mhm.
Yeah, so I started writing this book. Everyone said, "Oh, you're good at hospitality," and then I started writing a few chapters. I thought, I wonder if I am like, am I hospitable? What? When the Bible
Mm,
says, Scripture says, practice hospitality. I thought, gosh, I wonder if I'm doing it right. If that's the real definition of the word,
sure.
and so I looked it up, and the definition comes from a Greek word, philoxenia. It's a compound word meaning loving strangers as
Yep.
family. The philo like Philadelphia,
Yeah.
the xenia like xenophobia, fear of
Xenophobia.
strangers.
Yeah.
And that's like, oh, so many people are afraid that it's entertaining. So many people are afraid that it's like you said, it's about them, not about the people just needing connection that show up at your door. And so that's what I got super excited about.
Okay.
It's like, I think if everybody understood that to practice hospitality means let's practice loving strangers, uh, uh, and get over our fears.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the journey I'm on right now,
Right.
helping myself understand, helping others understand, why aren't you doing it? Because
Mm,
everybody loves the thought of hospitality or
sure.
somebody opening their home to them. Although even that, people are afraid, oh, if I go, then I'll have to owe them something. I'll have to,
What's in it for me? What do
yeah,
I?
and
Yeah.
then am I going to have to pay a price for stepping over their threshold, or if I bring them a bottle of wine, is it going to be from the right vintage? Are they going to look down on me? Will they put me in some other category? And, do you know what I'm talking about?
I totally do. I'm taking so many notes right now. Like that sort of, I'm just in the zone listening to you. I completely agree with you. And someone who's going to be on the TEDx stage with you on November the 9th, his name is Scott Martin. Like he has, in hearing his ideas, he talks about how we are in an age of mistrust.
Yeah.
And like how in many ways, like sort of the way that we get on social media and then it's like a switcheroo, right? It's like, gotcha,
Yeah.
I got you to click on my thing, or I got you to do this, or I got you to buy my thing, and I got you to buy the widget. And we're just so inundated with those kinds of messages and being disappointed. It would make sense that it would even, like, this era of mistrust would lead into, I don't know about philoxenia. Well, what's the opposite? Azenia? Like the opposite of philoxenia?
Xenophobia, and yeah, fear and rejection of anyone who doesn't look like, think like, act like me.
Yeah.
Buys a different brand of sneakers because, obviously they're not with it. If
Yeah.
I remember fighting that when my kids were little, and, I was not going to buy, I had 3 boys, and a girl, I was not going to get into the Nike sneakers. We just, we didn't
Yeah.
have it. And so, we got the Payless sneakers,
Yeah.
and then I saw neighbors with Payless sneakers, and it was like, okay, we can talk. But even that's so silly when I think of it. Like, could I just
It's
not be fine by myself with my kids in Payless sneakers, no matter who wore their Nikes,
well,
and love the people for wearing the Nikes, and and just not care about those things. Be willing to be our authentic selves, and just, this is us. If you want to know why I buy my kids Payless sneakers, I'll tell you. But hey, good for you for whatever
yeah.
you buy.
You
And
know what's
let me,
interesting? Mhm. Go ahead.
you go ahead.
No,
You
no,
go.
no. You are we? I hate when we fight, Annie.
I do too, Mark. No, but the thing is, everyone is unique. Everyone has a story. Um, Nobody is exactly like you. Nobody is thinking exactly like you.
Yeah.
And this was one of the things that God really laid on my heart. Um, Again, 3 sons, 1 daughter. I thought exactly like my older son. My husband would come home and go, like, what was he thinking? And then my daughter would say something, and I'm going like, what were you thinking? And then
Mm,
God said, okay, you guys, you know what? I have different personalities in this family, and you don't all think alike. And
mm,
it's all okay. And you can actually learn if you would ask them what they were thinking.
mm.
And when you change the tone from, obviously I'm right, you're wrong about the thinking, to
Yeah.
what were you thinking?
Yeah.
You get some amazing stories and insights into people's reasons for
Mm.
why they do things. And some things are stupid. Kids, yeah, I can see where you're thinking, wrong. No, you can't do it that way. But often it's just fascinating to see them, why are you coloring outside the lines? Oh, cool. I never
Yeah.
would have done that, but I like what you've done. I like
Yeah.
what you've done with that.
And how fun must that be to be able to walk through life not with a fixed mindset, but one that's open, where you get to reflect on a regular basis. Like, how fun was that today? How fun was that today to be able to learn from this person? I've already, because of my notes, I already know that I'm gonna be thanking my higher power later on today for this conversation. I, and it's just so interesting about the way that you talk about that because this hospitality thing is stuff where it's just like, we kind of know it's the right thing to do. I could see it when I was looking up uh, philoxenia. I saw the word eudaimonia, right? Living the good life. And
Hmm.
like, how much does giving and receiving have to do with living a eudaimonic life, living the good life. You know what I mean? And yeah, it was interesting because that was those two words were paired quite a bit. I also wanted to bring this up as you're talking, partially because we're talking TEDx here, but also when it comes to like us versus them and hospitality and those sorts of things. There was someone who I had picked up on 2 years ago. I cannot remember the name of the talk, but the premise of the talk was racism.
Okay.
Self-identified African American male, right? And having worked in a social justice sphere for a while, okay, yeah, okay, it's a black person talking about racism. That's fine, but here's where I feel like hospitality blew it out of the water. The way that he wanted to approach folks who he might have deemed as racist, he went and ate dinner with, and
Hmm.
so these folks were part of the KKK, and
Hmm.
they had ongoing discussions, just breaking bread with each other. And at the end of this process, the KKK issued him a certificate of friendship. Like, that's a real thing. You know what I mean? But like,
Yeah.
if, like how simple, like when we know that it's that simple and we don't do it, I
Yeah.
guess the question that do I have for you is we all kind of know ever since we were little kids that this is not, I don't want to go into the right thing to do, but we know that, okay, I don't want to say we, I just want to say I, right? And the higher power that I've been rolling with my life has always been telling me if you do this, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel great. And I don't do it all the time. What's the deal with that, Annie?
Well, that's it. I've got a couple answers for that,
Okay.
or a couple of questions back. One is, and this is what's happened to me.
Okay.
The closer I get to that higher power, and as I started writing the books, and I started thinking about the stories where I was offered hospitality, and I've been to the White House, and I've been invited into literal tent villages with um, Indian lepers who are going to die within the week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they've invited both those places invited me in,
Mm-hmm.
and I just saw, I've seen in every story, God's heart is for us to see each other and connect to each other. He made a world. He invited us into this beautiful garden in Eden.
Yeah.
And the last story is about a banquet. Come and party with me. And I mean that's God. And the more I get to know Him, that's God. That's who He is. And and the forgiveness part of it. A lot of us close our doors because we've been hurt. Either emotionally or somebody did break our stuff, and when I started reading the book again and or writing the book, and I thought, okay, where do I start? Do I start with one of my stories? And I pray a lot, and I felt like
Yeah.
God said, well, start with my story. I'm like, okay, well, your story starts in a garden. And he goes, yeah. And the guests were really bad actors.
Mm.
I invited them in and I gave them everything to touch, and they touched the one thing I told them not to touch. Um, and he said, don't expect any better from your guests. but
Mm. Mm.
but he said, but I didn't stop offering hospitality.
Mm.
I went with them. I kind of gave them a few more boundaries. No, you know, you can't be
Yeah.
trusted not to touch them here, but I'm going with you.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
start over. I'm not going to abandon you. The presence is still the hospitality thing. Let's keep rebuilding, and let's end with a party. Um, that's the God that I have come to know, Mark. And
Yeah.
uh, but we need to forgive because stuff is going to get broken.
Yeah.
Relationships are going to get broken, and we're going to need to hurt for each other in
Yeah.
those moments. We need to rethink. I, you know, oh, there was a login idea, you know, because I sure saw that speck in yours. Um, can we begin to do these things? Because, oh, if we want to be real, if we want to be authentic, it's so freeing just to own and get rid of our own fallen
Yeah,
nature, broken nature, sinfulness. Get it out there. Yes, I said something and I realize now it really hurt you. I am so sorry. And you don't have to defend yourself because I have
yeah,
my 6 reasons why I said it. Just say, gosh, I see that hurt you and I am sorry. Period. Can
done.
can we
Hard stop.
go have lunch?
Yeah. Can we go to the party? Right?
Can we go? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I, just to play devil's advocate here,
Sure.
what about someone who will have a conversation with you and they'll say, I've done this a couple times, and every time I've done it, someone will overstay their welcome with me, or they'll take advantage. Like what you're talking about, How do you
Hmm.
go back and have that kind of conversation that I don't even know where to start with that, but just like there's life after people
Yeah.
overstaying their welcome with you. How do you address that?
Well, there's a couple things, and again, I get kind of biblically informed. One says,
Hmm.
"Practice hospitality without grumbling." I was
Hmm.
like, "That's interesting that that's in there," because you know what? A lot of us are prone to grumble
Yeah,
when people have stayed too long. But also even the whole first story, boundaries are okay. It's
got it.
okay to set some boundaries. And I think you've got to check, where is your family at? The first people
Mm,
we have to be hospitable to is ourselves. Again, it's not all about self-love, but just
yeah,
check in with your maker. Like, what do I have? You know, how can I love this person well with the energy you give me, but not be the doormat? Let's.
no, I
Uh,
totally get it. I totally get it.
so there's a place, but there are going to be places where we're stretched, and in those places of stretching, um, again, for me, prayer, taking a deep breath, assessing the situation, is this something where I did not put in a healthy boundary, or I did not speak truthfully and I've been faking it till I make it, or is this just a hard conversation that I have to have with a person and express that I still love them, express that, whatever their need is, I want them to have their needs fulfilled. But
Mm,
right now, I can't do that, or I'm not the
yeah.
person to do it. But I'm going to stick with you. I'm going to, I'm still for you. We don't have to have the all or nothing, abuse me or cut me off. Eh, do you know what I'm saying?
I totally know what you're saying, and I'm glad that you're saying it from this standpoint because, and I might I may have butchered this passage, but I believe Jesus was talking to a group of folk, and he said something along the lines of, "Don't share your pearls with the swine." Right?
Well,
I
yeah,
may, I may have
yeah, you can
misquoted
take
or.
that one out of context, but that's
Okay,
okay.
okay, okay. Jesus, I'm
So,
sorry, man.
you know what? He's all about forgiveness. It's okay, Mark. Um, but in some ways, no, it is true, because it, or just understand that um, sometimes you're going to share things and people are not going to treat them with the respect that they should.
Oh, that's the
And
pearls with the swine part.
that's
Okay,
the pearls for him. It was those truths about life with people who may not understand it, because or just expect to know that, again, not that people are pigs, but so much, but people will not treat it with the loving,
got it.
tender care that you think they should.
But that can't be
Does that?
applied to
Well,
hospitality
it can
too?
be. Yeah,
Okay.
no, it can be applied to that. Yeah, but
Manny said
because
Manny's fighting.
oh,
He
does he have a
wants
slip
to.
of paper in his hand? I want to know what it says.
No, but no. Yeah, because to me that's one of the most powerful parts of the good book, right? Is this
Yeah,
idea of having those boundaries. But at
yeah,
least from what you're talking about, it's yes and it is yes
I,
hospitality and boundaries. Like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it feels very
Eh,
healthy.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
actually, God wants us to be healthy.
yeah.
Shock. I think some people don't know that. And those fears really are some of the fears that make us afraid. People are afraid, oh my gosh, will I have enough? This is one of the most exciting things about hospitality, Mark. And I don't know if you've encountered this. I always have, okay, my house can handle so many guests. God's
Mhm.
like, oh, good, I'm going to double that and send them your way. Oh, okay. It's like, okay, I have food to feed this many people. Okay, six extra people are going to show up. Okay. And every time there's always, 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 always been enough.
The loaves and the fishes, baby.
It happens on a daily basis. I would say probably on this planet, it is happening on every minute of every day. God is in the business of multiplying loaves and fishes
Mhm.
and making sure if we are willing to share them, if we're willing to share our first loaf
Yeah.
and give it, it expands. It can feed a multitude.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about this message of hospitality.
Yeah.
Your things about joy, there's enough. You're not going to run out of joy by sharing ideas. There
Absolutely.
will always be enough. And that in itself, just gets me excited.
I love what you're talking about. And I'm going to ask you in a second. Like, I do want to hear a story of when you saw this happen. And, there's one thing, oftentimes when we're talking about currency, it's almost like this finite amount of currency. We give it out and we lose it and those sorts of things. I truly feel like joy is a currency that we never run out of. And now that you're talking about this, hospitality is too. It's a currency that like we just never run out of it. And so when we engage in it truly, any kind of like doubt that we may have is it goes out. Just do your thing and let God do the rest, right? Just don't even think about how God's gonna do it. Just do your thing and let Him do the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So I am curious. I like what has been a real life story that you've seen where those things multiply.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, even down to the penny, there was one time where I was inviting all these people to an event
Mhm.
and that I thought, how am I going to pay for? I was part of a committee and it was like we
Mhm.
had no money. And so I'm thinking, okay,
Did they
well,
make cartoons of you in the committee?
this is a different thing. Um, but it was going to be a citywide event. We were trying to gather a lot of people together. And I thought, okay, I'm going to gather all these people that don't
Yeah.
really like each other. And I'm going to have a luncheon for them. And then I was like, okay, and who's going to pay? And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to tell my husband that we're going to pay for this. And I'm thinking kind of the boundary thing, like, and so I'm at this venue, checking out this venue, and they're like, okay, and this is going to be the bill. And I'm like, okay. And I got this phone call. Um, I mean, odd phone call. I didn't recognize the number. And it's this woman that I knew from another organization. And she had never called me. And I'm like, is everything okay? And she said, yeah, I just wanted you to know that our organization, um, they they do a kind of a generous tithe into something else at the end of every month.
Mhm.
And we had this amount of money and it was like $674. And she said, and I know it's not a lot, but I just wanted to call you and tell you we're sending you a check for this amount. Mark, the bill they had just handed me
No.
was for $763.52 or something. And I was like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, um, I mean, I was just stunned.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's one story. I mean, my story that I'll share on the TED Talk was being alone in France without any money and this crazy communication mix up. And I ended up in this city where my friend was supposed to be, but there'd been a postal strike and she didn't show. And I didn't think about bringing money because I was a stupid college student and I had
It's
traveler's
like, what are you
checks.
doing with no
Yeah,
money?
I mean, again, this was a long time ago. No cell phones, no, email,
What did
no
they teach you in Dartmouth?
no credit cards. I know. So I had this little traveler's check, and nobody wanted to cash it in this city. And I need to get back on the next train, and they wouldn't let me back on the next train. And so I'm sitting there at this park, and there is stranger danger. Let me just
Yeah.
say that. There are some people that are unsafe, but it is so few of the people in the world are the ones
Mhm.
we have to be afraid of, and most are just people like you and me, just in need of
Mm-hmm.
connection. You just don't know me yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting on this bench, and it was the creepy guy starts coming over. And I'm like, where do I go? And I've got nowhere to go. So I'm in this park, and I see this very old peasant woman sitting on a bench. So my instinct says, safe, go. So I'm racing over to visit this woman, who then stands up, and my heart just like, but she was looking at me, and she like didn't leave, and she motions to me and has me sit on the bench next to her
Whoa.
and kind of embraces me. And by the grace of God, I start having enough French to communicate with her, and we're chatting away, and the creepy guy moves off, and then she looks over at me. She said, "You must be hungry." And I'm like, I wanted to lie because, but I didn't have any money. But here's this peasant woman, who's been nice enough to show me a
Oh
place on
my
her bench. And
gosh.
she brings out, this is a real story, Mark. She brings out a loaf of bread, and she breaks it in half. Then she reaches into her little sack, pulls out another little plastic bag, breaks her 2 bananas in half, gives me a banana, rolls out her 4 slices of cheese, gives me 2 of them, explains that she's a diabetic, doesn't take salt and different things, wraps those up, puts them in this other bag, and then says, "I have to go." And she hands it to me and disappears around a corner. And I I was just shocked. I had been seen and loved and fed and protected by this woman who asked for nothing in return. So much about hospitality is like, oh, they got here 5 minutes early, or they stayed 2 minutes late, or whatever. She
Wow.
wasn't expecting me.
Yeah.
She wasn't prepared for me. She hadn't brought 2 loaves of bread. She just sat there, offered her bench, protected me from the fear and the storm that she saw in my eyes, and she shared half of what she had. This is her, when I think of it now, Mark, I think of that woman changed my life. That woman whose name I can't even remember.
Yeah.
That woman who probably has no idea that her story is going to get told on the TEDx stage,
Yeah. Right.
in a couple of weeks. But that's the kind of difference makers we can be.
Yeah.
Just look around.
I,
Just look around. Somebody needs something. Can we be a vehicle to
yeah.
connect them?
Yeah. I just want to sit in this moment for a second because it just feels so good, to know that as much of the world's getting more disconnected, this sort of thing. Oh my goodness. Full body chills. Is that Holy Spirit? Like, what's coming? Is that full body chills right now? Oh, on my head. And this is a point where I don't have to think about my the mark that shows up for the podcast, and just sort of the mark that gets to connect with Annie and hear your story, man. I just called you man, sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you for the reassurance that the default is that we're connected.
Yeah.
The default is that we're connected. And all right, okay, go. It's coming. It was come back down anytime you want, Holy Spirit. But it just feels so good. It feels so
It's
good.
who we're made to be.
Yes.
He made us for connection.
Yeah.
And we only fool ourselves when we think, kind of in the American way, I don't need you. I don't need my neighbors. I don't need the people, especially the people who don't think like me. I don't need them.
Them.
Yes, we do. Every person has some value. Every person was created for something that will add to our collective life, to our collective joy. And the ones that haven't found it yet need us to connect with them.
Yeah, I feel it.
And they need to often, I've worked with a lot of gang members. You probably don't think I do, looking at me.
No,
but
you look pretty hard. You look pretty hardcore.
Yeah. I've been in Honduran prisons, locked in. The guards stay on the outside because they're kind of afraid. But when you get locked into a Honduran prison with some high security, gang members, the ones that are in real lockdown, you just realize more than ever, I want to have access to just let you know it was worth it for me to
Yeah.
come and just let you know you're still loved. I don't
Yeah.
care what you did. I mean, it might have been horrendous, but you know what? You are still loved. If you have life and breath, you're still loved. You can be forgiven. Things can get better. You can make the rest of your decisions better decisions. And, but people need to be loved and they need to be seen and they need to be
Wow.
forgiven.
Wow. Wow. I'm curious how has that landed with them, with many of them?
Well, um, they didn't want to admit it. They were crying. Um, these were tough.
Yeah.
It was actually a women's prison that I've been in men's too, but in this particular case, um, there were tears and they were so embarrassed.
Yeah.
In a men's prison, I had this guy named Mexicano. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names, but anyways, but
Manny, bleep it.
yeah, bleep that one out, Manny. But this guy, 666 tattooed across his
Yeah.
head, and these were tough guys, 18th Street Gang in Honduras, and um, and over the years, we would just go and, bring our medical teams and just treat them like humans. And after about 6 years, and our missionaries down there are just lovely people who would just go in weekly and just love them. And one year, you know, um, this head of the gang was not going like, I'm just going to make sure nothing funny happens with these strange people in here. And
Hmm.
and I really felt like God said, go give him this thing. And some of the other prisoners who had turned their lives around had written some scripture on some things. And as people would come in, they'd sell them to the visitors to get money to,
Yeah.
buy who knows what. But anyway, so I bought one and I was going to bring it home. And then I just felt like God said, go give this to the guy who's watching. And I didn't realize that he wasn't part of the nicer
Yeah.
guys in the gang. He was the, like, watch out because it's not going to be good. And um, and I just went up to him and said, here you go. God wants you to have this. And I get back on the bus and people go, you talk to him. You talk to him. Nobody talks to him. I'm like, oh, nobody told me that I wasn't supposed to talk. Here, I'm stupid soccer mom. So I did. Um, 2 years later, Mexicano, we go back. We've got the medical team. And he had changed his heart. And he had changed the culture in the prison. And he
Oh
stood
my
up
gosh.
on this little box and he said, before you guys leave, I just want to pray for you all. And we were so shocked, Mark.
Yeah.
And, but that's what, you know, we have to leave room. We have to leave room for transformation
Yeah.
in ourselves, in the people around us. And just trust that the love of God never runs out.
Right.
There will be enough.
It runneth over, just like the loaves and the fishes.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So the TEDx is coming up. This is there are so many ways that we can go with this one.
And
Yeah,
they want me now to cut it down to 8 minutes,
I know. Can
which is probably good. That's good.
Why do people fall away from God?
Mm. A couple of reasons. One, there is a really effective advertising media stuff out there that seems extremely alluring. You'll
Hmm.
be happy if. You'll be feeling better if. Your parties will be more fun if.
Hmm.
And we fall for those. We have eyes that crave joy, that crave affection, that
Hmm.
crave good things. But if we don't know the true source of those things, we follow after the false ones.
Hmm.
And even if we get hurt, then often it's our shame. Sometimes addictions happen.
Yeah.
And we get stuck, and we get afraid that we can't get out, or we get afraid to let people know that this has happened to us. And then we think, like Adam and Eve in the garden, that we have to hide from this God who actually has come looking for us, and doesn't care. His response was like, oh my gosh, you're done, mankind is over. It's like, you know what, there's going to be a price. I'm going to have to kill an animal, but I'm going to clothe you, and I'm going to continue to feed you. And you know what, Mark, you and I are here.
Yeah.
Life has gone on,
Yeah.
and he's still with us. And he still says, I still love you, and there's forgiveness. So, but that's part of it.
Yeah.
We're afraid. We keep thinking, oh, it's got to be some other reason. I mean, you were saying you went to a Jesuit school. I went to one too. Sometimes you think, oh, that's God, and some of that was so ungodly. God must not be real.
So punk rock sometimes.
Yeah, and again, that's not God. That's somebody's interpretation of it.
Yeah.
And it was in college that, a very secular college, but I started seeing people that just lived differently and kind of lived with a freedom and lived with this kind of love. And I'm like, what do you do? and
Yeah.
and they just actually read scripture. I'm like, oh, huh. And they're and got in touch with God, who is God, who can be found in the changing leaves, who
Yeah.
can be found in the song of a bird, that can be found in beauty and art, that can be found in the unique faces we
Yeah.
see. Yeah, and so to just give God a chance to be bigger, be Him, read the stories of forgiveness, and realize actually that's a real story.
Yeah.
That's not just a fiction. That's a real story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mystical. There's a lot of mystery.
Sure.
I've had, we can have another talk at
Oh,
crazy
we will.
stories.
Oh,
Yeah,
we will.
because
Don't you worry.
I've
You're
got
not getting
crazy
away.
stories, Mark. Yeah,
Yeah.
just like, whoa, not necessarily, oh, I use that word. There
Yeah.
you go. That's why I use
Woo!
that word.
Yes. I was about to say you're probably one of the most woo people I've met. So
Well,
um
good.
well,
But anyways,
I want to throw this out because in my
okay.
introduction, I was curious because one of the first things that you listed in the bio was that you're a connector and an encourager. And I completely see why you say that, from the standpoint of um, doing God's work, right?
Mhm.
It would be being a person who is a connector. It would be a person who yep, what dude, I love all this. It would be a person who comes in and sees and hears and feels another person through encouragement. It just makes sense. I understand. I know that there's more to learn, and I will, but it makes sense that that's sort of what you would be doing and why it's going to be a big deal that you go up on the TEDx stage. Is that not masterful? Is that not masterful work? Did Manal tell you how good that was going to be?
That plus really kind.
Well, I wanted to throw this out there as well before we go into the TEDx stuff. Especially with Western thought, as you're and approaches, as you're talking about like going into systems like prisons. One of the biggest ways when you tell somebody you messed up in Western culture is, I'm going to send you out of the city limits. I'm going to put you out by yourself. Or in modern days, it's we're going to send you to a penitentiary, a prison, a psych ward where you're going to be removed from the rest of the general public, And so I was thinking about what, sort of the way that we do that in this this Western minded philosophy. And then there was this story that I heard. I can't remember the name of the group, but there was a story of an indigenous group in Africa that when you mess up, their way of connecting and encouraging is to put you in the center of a circle. Everyone's around you, and one by one they come up to you and they remind you of how much of an amazing person you've been, with like a story of this is the way you've changed my life. You may have done this, but you've still changed my life. And so to just gather around a person can feel, it can feel very wild for a bit. But as you're talking about this, that's the kind of connection that I see, and the encouragement that I see you talking about.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a beautiful story.
Mm.
I don't know if you know that the word penitentiary came
No.
from, they would make these single isolated cells, and
Penitence?
yeah, and they'd only have a window up. The only window was on the ceiling, and they would expect people to go in, consider what it would be like to be isolated alone, and then look up and make peace with God. That
Oh,
was the
wow.
original design for penitentiaries, was to help them learn to be penitent, um,
Well,
and
where did we
remorseful.
mess that one up?
Isn't that interesting? And now we lock them all in a big group and just
Yeah.
like, have at it. But isn't that interesting?
Oh my gosh, it's so interesting. So interesting.
Yeah. But that encouragement, we need that connection, and it's so much better. Like,
Yeah.
I could send you a bunch of emails. You sent me a lot of emails in the last week. But I'm thinking, and you use my name, but I'm like, he has no idea who I am. I'm just he got it because
I
but
did read parts of the book.
then you
So
read
yeah.
parts of the book,
Yeah.
but to see each other,
Yeah.
and sometimes we can do that on our phone.
Yeah.
But I want to meet you sometime, Mark. I want to meet you, like,
Likewise.
yeah, and
Completely.
there are people all around me that I can have at my table today,
Mm-hmm.
but fear or time constraints, or thinking something's more important than
Yeah.
that. Like, we do need to be a little more thoughtful about,
Yeah.
what is really important,
Yeah.
and what is going to be important tomorrow.
Mm.
So what can I do today,
Absolutely
that
love it.
can just connect?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're about to take the stage. At the time of recording, you're about 14 days out.
Yeah.
I hope that you guys are watching the video of this, because her eyes just got so big right now. How is that going in terms of the process? How is it going? Obviously you have a lot of zeal and excitement about this topic, and also a TEDx stage is, at least from what I've seen, is very different from any other stage.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity to sort of stand in that red dot and sort of communicate with other folks and connect to them. How's that going for you?
Well, it's such a privilege, and I
Yeah.
had no idea. I approached it in a very different way. A lot of people want to be on a
Yeah.
TED stage, and they apply to TEDx places all over the country and all over the world now. I didn't do that. I kind of got asked because my topic resonated.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, well, she's asking me to. And then I didn't realize that, 150 other people are also applying for
A
this
lot
thing.
of
I'm like,
people. Yeah.
whoa. And then I started, reading about, people, just different emails you get. Hey, did you ever want to do a TEDx talk? So I would open these emails. Hey, for $1,000, we'll teach you how to get on a TEDx
Yeah.
stage somewhere. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is an open door. I'm about hospitality. I'm going to walk through open doors. But as the days get closer, I'm thinking, I really, I'm not good at memorizing things. I love talking to people
Yeah, you
across
do.
the table. And I may fall flat on my face, but then I talk to this God who says, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Just don't take too many minutes to do it. Fall quick. They'll be happy with you.
Quickly.
So, keep it within time limit. It's not about you.
Yeah.
If I can communicate anything that encourages someone out there to get over their fear of either opening their own door or crossing over someone else's threshold, or forgiving or reconciling with someone and getting more connected, then I'm gonna use, as many minutes as they give me, and allow me to hopefully say something that connects with someone. And so for that opportunity, I am so grateful.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see this thing. 2 minutes less, 2 minutes shorter, right? I I don't know if you've met Manny. He's
Manny. Can I see Manny?
He's shy. He said, "No, I'm shy."
Okay.
Just trust that I'm in a multi-million-dollar studio, and he's over here, right? Telling me that he wants to play a game with you.
Okay.
He wants to connect with you.
All right.
In a game.
Okay, Manny.
Okay. So, for the folks listening at home who's never heard this, Manny wants to play a game with you, Annie. And as you know, joy is a pretty big part of, I would like to say, my life and your life in terms of the things that I got from you in the book. And so it's just a simple question, fill in the blank. It's very serious, no smiling. It's very serious. Not a lot of people, no one's ever won this game, right? And essentially he's going to say something, and then the answer is how you embody joy, right? And so we've got 5 questions to ask in terms of how you embody joy and how you would answer a certain question. It can be a 1-sentence thing, or it could be a full-on paragraph soliloquy, part of the 2 minutes of your TED Talk that you had to remove, all of that, right? Okay, so here's the first question. Joy smells like
lilacs and gardenias and just the best fragrance ever. Vanilla on the stove, vanilla tea, chai tea, just those cinnamon, apple pie, those things. Yeah.
That was number one. That was more than one answer, but I'm looking over here. I'm looking over here at Manny. He has this basket. He's got a straw basket, and he's opening it up. Oh my goodness. Fresh gardenias. There's I didn't ever notice this before, but there is vanilla that is cooking on a stove. He's cooking with some cinnamon, apple pie, chai, all of the above. Congratulations, you got 1 point for that one. Well done. Well done. All right, the second question that Manny wants to ask you is, joy tastes like
that apple pie.
That apple pie?
Uh-huh.
Number one, he's really excited that you stuck with one answer this time, right? And then he is tasting, he is eating the apple pie, and you know what? A single tear is coming down the side of his face. You are correct again. No one has ever gone this far in the game. 2 points. My goodness, we're going into uncharted territory here. All right. Joy looks like
a podcast where you are having fun and really seeing beyond the screens, beyond the microphones and the headsets, into someone's heart.
Oh, are you feeling that, Manny? Podcast. It looks like a podcast. You know what? He's taken his headphones off. One more swig of that apple pie. 2 tears around the side of his face. He agrees with you. Joy does look like a podcast. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. 3 points. This is like Guinness World Record right now in terms of the amount of points. All right. So 3-0. Fourth question. Joy sounds like
laughter. Laughter and if I can add one more thing, harmony. Just shouting out beautiful Harmony, 4-part, at least.
Here to join. Annie, Mark, Manny is now, it's very high falsetto. And he said, no, that is not what joy sounds like.
Really?
-1,000 points. What are you doing? What are you doing, man? So you're at -900. I told you, this game is cutthroat. This game is cutthroat. So you're at -997 points going into the last round. You got nothing to lose.
It's okay.
Joy feels like.
Oh, like you're being loved and hugged.
Manny said, I love you too.
Thanks, Manny.
998 points. By 1 point. By 1 point. You just snuck through, Annie. Thanks for being willing to play the game. So, as you know, there's this philosophy. I don't know what it's called. It's this idea of a joy revolution, right? And there's a bunch of different ways you can approach it, right? The first thing is the ups, like the feeling that your heart is full and it runneth over with joy, right? I tend to think that I felt that today during our conversation, right? Another thing is using joy as a leadership tool for social change, right? Let's get rid of the me versus you. Let's get rid of the thinking that you've got nothing to contribute to society just because you did one thing, right? So I'm going to ask you your joy revolution, Annie. And so with that said, what is your joy revolution?
Well, my joy revolution is just encouraging people to open their doors and learn to love first the people in their home really well. Let's look them in the eye. Let's listen better. Let's break bread together. And then let's take it out to the neighbors and as far as it goes.
I'm willing to take a stand behind that joy revolution. I'm willing to take a stand. So here's the deal, y'all. It's about 14 days away from TEDxOcala. This will sell out like it usually does. And so you're going to want to go to TEDxOcala.com, pick up a virtual ticket or a real life ticket. And we get to see Annie 2 weeks from now doing her thing. Also, remember, this is hot off the presses, Practicing Hospitality, the Joy and Grace of Loving Strangers. So that is on that is in Amazon and Barnes and Noble right now.
Yep.
So with that said, I can't wait to see you in person, Annie. And for your sake, for my sake, for our sake, for goodness sake, start your revolution. Start it in love, in light, in shadow, and in joy, baby.